When I told my family I had breast cancer, I never imagined my sister would turn my illness into her spotlight. She didn't have cancer, but she made sure everyone thought she did. What started as support became the most twisted betrayal I've ever lived through. And when I finally exposed her, everything in our family shattered. I'm Marin, 31, female. And if you told me a year ago that breast cancer would end up being the least painful part of my story, I'd have laughed in your face. When the doctor said the words, malignant, surgery, chemo, I felt my world shrink down to the sound of my heartbeat. Everything else went blurry, but the first thing I thought about wasn't dying. It was how I was going to tell my family. I've got one sister, Victoria. She's 35, and to put it bluntly, she's always been a walking disaster, wrapped in glitter. Late to every event, borrowing money she forgets to pay back, crying her way out of every mess she creates. Growing up, she'd wreck my things, then tell mom I did it. When I got into college on scholarship, she announced she was taking time off to find herself. She's been finding herself ever since. Still, when I told my family about my diagnosis, I wanted her there. Maybe I was naive. I thought, she's my sister, this will wake her up, right? At first it did seem like it. She was weirdly calm on the phone, then showed up at my door that night with a basket of lavender candles and a sympathy card addressed to my warrior. She hugged me and said, "We're in this together, Marin. I'm not letting you go through it alone." For a second I believed her. She started coming to appointments, asking the nurses questions, taking notes in this fancy leather notebook she probably bought on credit. When I started chemo, she shaved her head with me, only she posted it on Instagram before the clumps of my real hair even hit the floor. The caption read, "Sacrifice is love. Sister strong. One brave together." It got hundreds of likes. I remember scrolling through her post while vomiting into a plastic bucket that night, seeing strangers call her an angel. I told myself it didn't matter. If her performative nonsense helped her process things, fine, let her have it. Then one morning, about 2 weeks before my double mastectomy, she sat across from me at her kitchen table, tearing up like she was about to tell me she'd been diagnosed too. And she said, "I've made a big decision, Marin. I'm getting a double mastectomy too, for solidarity." I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought it was one of her tone-deaf jokes. But she pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of her surgery date. Booked, deposited, paid. My stomach dropped. She said, "It's not just hair this time. I'm showing the world what sisterhood really means." I remember whispering, "Victoria, you don't have cancer." And she smiled and said, "No, but I have empathy." That's when I realized this wasn't about me surviving anymore. It was about Victoria finding a new stage to stand on. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria's smile. The smug, self-satisfied curve of someone who just discovered a new way to make herself the main character.
Hey guys, real quick before we keep going, don't forget to sub and drop a like if you're enjoying the story. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching.
The next morning, my mom called. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. "Honey, Victoria told me about her decision. Isn't that beautiful? She's so brave." I just sat there in silence, phone pressed to my ear, while my mom gushed about how selfless Victoria was for doing this for me. I could hear my dad in the background saying, "That's real sisterhood right there." I wanted to scream. But instead I said, "Mom, she doesn't need the surgery. She's fine." And my mom said, "Oh, Marin, don't be petty. Let her show support in her own way." That broke something in me. 5 days later, Victoria had her solidarity surgery. She live-streamed part of it from the hospital bed, voice trembling dramatically as she told her followers how she chose pain out of love. The video went viral. She gained over 20,000 followers overnight. Meanwhile, I was throwing up from chemo. My body was breaking down cell by cell, and everyone in my family was too busy praising Victoria's courage to notice. When my surgery day finally came, my mom only stayed with me for 2 nights. She said, "Victoria still needs me, sweetheart. She's struggling with her recovery." I stared at her, still bandaged and sore, tubes draining fluid from my chest. "I'm the one who had cancer, Mom." She looked uncomfortable, like I was being selfish for mentioning it. By the time I was home, Victoria's fundraiser had raised almost $15,000. She posted pictures of her bandaged chest with long captions about sacrifice, tagged with "healing together" and "my sister, my strength." Every time I opened my phone, there she was, my sister, the fake martyr, telling the world how hard this had been for her. And the worst part? People believed it. She was getting messages from survivors calling her inspiring, journalists reaching out for interviews. She told me one evening, all casual, "A magazine wants to do a feature. Isn't that amazing?" I wanted to throw my phone through a wall, but instead I smiled and said, "You deserve it." Because while she was busy building her empire of lies, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her posts, copies of her fundraiser, notes about what she said, what she did, who she told. If Victoria wanted to make my cancer her performance, I'd make sure the curtain came crashing down on opening night. The following weeks blurred into this sick, surreal routine. Me recovering from an actual double mastectomy while watching Victoria turn her elective surgery into a one-woman media tour. Every time I opened my phone, there she was, posing with flowers and writing captions like, "Pain shared is pain halved. Sisters in healing." Meanwhile, I was changing blood-soaked gauze pads by myself, because my mother was still camped out at Victoria's apartment, helping her adjust to her new body. I tried to focus on my recovery, eat something, shower without crying, sleep through the pain, but I couldn't escape it. Friends from high school started messaging me, saying, "Wow, your sister's amazing." Even my boss sent a text, "You're lucky to have someone like her." Lucky. Right. A week later, Victoria called me, sounding elated. "Guess what, Marin? A publisher reached out. They want me to write a memoir about my journey." I nearly dropped the phone. "Your what?" "My journey," she repeated like it was obvious. "They said it's groundbreaking. Choosing solidarity surgery as a symbol of empathy. They think it could help millions." That's when the nausea hit again, but this time it wasn't chemo, it was rage. She kept talking, voice climbing with excitement. "I want you to help me write it. You're such a good writer, and you'll know all the details from your perspective. It'll make the story more powerful." For a few seconds, I couldn't even form words. Then something cold and sharp settled in my chest. "Of course," I said softly. "Come over, we'll start tomorrow." That night, I cleaned my apartment for the first time in weeks, set up my laptop, and hid a small recorder behind the lamp on my coffee table. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, only that I needed to keep a record. Victoria arrived the next evening, wearing a soft cardigan and fake modesty. She carried a notebook, but barely opened it. Instead, she talked. For hours. She told me she'd been haunted by my diagnosis, that she felt powerless until she realized she could share my pain physically. She even described staying up late, reading about cancer surgeries until she just knew it was her destiny. I typed everything, every lie, every word. By the time she left, I had pages of material documenting exactly how she turned my trauma into her performance art. That night, I stared at the document on my screen, scrolling through her words until my eyes burned. I realized I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was building a weapon. Over the next few weeks, I became two people. There was Marin, the tired woman in loose shirts, healing from surgery, and dragging herself to chemo appointments with veins so bruised they looked inked. And then there was the other version, cold, meticulous, quietly taking notes, while Victoria built her fantasy empire. She sent me long voice messages almost every night, sometimes at 2 a.m., rambling about her chapter ideas. How she wanted to open with, "The day my sister's pain became my purpose." I'd lie in bed listening, tears soaking my pillow, not because of cancer this time, but because I was realizing just how far gone she was. Each message went into a labeled folder. Book ideas, interviews, fundraiser lies. I kept every file backed up twice. On my laptop and a flash drive, I hid inside an old shoebox under my bed. Then came the magazine feature. A glossy lifestyle magazine published a spread titled "Sister of Strength," one woman's choice to share her sister's pain. The photos were unbearable. Victoria sitting by a window in soft lighting, bandaged chest partially visible, a look of noble suffering on her face. The article called her a martyr of modern empathy. My mother framed the damn thing, put it on the mantel. I stared at it during Sunday dinner, my arms aching from lymphedema, drains still taped to my skin. Nobody asked how my body felt. They were too busy discussing which late-night talk show Victoria should go on. I couldn't eat, couldn't speak, just smiled tightly and waited until everyone left the room. Then I took the framed article off the mantel and hid it behind the couch. That night, something inside me finally clicked into place. I called my oncologist, Dr. Shaw, and asked her to print out my full medical records, every pathology report, every surgery note, every chemo schedule. I told her I needed to clarify the timeline. She didn't ask why, but when I came to pick them up, she looked at me for a long moment before saying quietly, "You're doing the right thing." When I got home, I spread the papers across my dining table and began connecting them to Victoria's lies. Every fake quote, every exaggerated scene, every time she posted a crying selfie while I was hooked up to IV drips. By the end of the night, I had what looked like a case file. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to let her publish that book. And that's when it happened. The update moment. 3 days later, Victoria called, squealing, through the phone. "Marin, guess what? The book's officially greenlit. They're sending over the contract tomorrow. We did it." My vision tunneled. I whispered, "That's amazing." Then I smiled to myself, because I finally knew exactly what I was going to do. I don't think I've ever felt more awake than I did that night. The second I hung up, I opened my laptop and stared at the glowing screen until my pulse steadied. The plan started forming, clean and sharp, like lines of glass slotting together. If Victoria wanted a story, I'd give her one, the real one. The next morning, she texted me a photo of herself signing the contract. $50,000 advance. "We did it, sis," I replied, "proud of you." Meanwhile, I was already contacting her journalist, the same one who wrote the original Sister of Strength article. I introduced myself politely, saying I wanted to help with Victoria's memoir research. He was thrilled, told me he still had his interview notes and raw recordings. We met at a coffee shop. He handed over a flash drive while sipping his latte, thinking I was part of the publicity machine. Inside were hours of recordings, Victoria embellishing every detail. She claimed she'd been in the doctor's office when I got my diagnosis, that she held my hand while we cried together. None of it was true. I saved the files, labeled them lies, press evidence. At home, I started collecting more screenshots of her fundraiser, her Instagram captions, every time she described her surgery as life-saving. She wasn't just lying, she was profiting. $15,000 from strangers who thought she was fighting cancer. My rage burned low and steady, almost comforting. It gave me energy I hadn't felt since before my diagnosis. I made an appointment with a lawyer, Donald Terry, who specialized in medical fraud. I sat in his quiet office with my binder of evidence and told him everything: chemo, Victoria's surgery, the fundraiser, the book. He flipped through the pages, face unreadable. When I finished, he looked up and said, "Miss, I've seen a lot of ugly things. But this is exploitation. Document everything. Don't tell her you're on to her yet." That became my new mantra. Don't tell her. I went along with her emails about our project. I wrote draft chapters she asked for, fake ones, full of flattering details she wanted to see. But I also wrote another version, the truth, line by line, side by side. Every lie she told, I countered with evidence. Every selfless act, I matched with receipts, messages, photos. 2 weeks later, she called me, thrilled again. "They want promo shots, photos of us together, sisters united through pain." I said yes. The day of the shoot, she wore a soft pink dress and a brave little smile. I wore baggy clothes to hide the swelling. The photographer told her, "You're glowing, Victoria. You're incredible." I just smiled for the camera, thinking, smile now. Because when this story breaks, that's the face the world will remember. The photo shoot marked the point of no return. Afterward, while Victoria gushed about lighting angles and hashtags, I excused myself to the bathroom. I stood there, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. Hollow eyes, pale skin, scars still puckered under my loose shirt. She'd built a whole brand on pretending to share my pain, and everyone bought it, but soon, they'd know the truth. That night, I started organizing everything into a single master file, the truth about Victoria. I divided it by category: medical fraud, fundraiser theft, fabricated scenes, emotional exploitation. Over 200 pages, each section filled with proof. Screenshots, recordings, medical reports, even statements from my oncologist confirming my surgery was medically required and hers was purely elective. When I sent the file to Donald Terry, my lawyer, he called almost immediately. "Marin," he said, "this is airtight. If she publishes that book, the publisher could be liable for fraud." I felt the first hint of satisfaction in months. Then I think it's time someone warned them. But I had to time it right. The next morning, Victoria called, practically shrieking with joy. "Marin, the publisher wants to move the release date up to spring. They said the story's too inspiring to wait." My chest tightened. "That's great news," I said evenly. "When did they start fact-checking?" "Oh, they already assigned someone, Danielle Cook. She's amazing, apparently." "Perfect." Over the next week, I prepped for my meeting with Danielle the way soldiers prep for war. Donald walked me through everything: how to stay calm, how to speak their language. "You're not angry," he told me. "You're a concerned source protecting them from liability. Keep your emotions under the surface until you've handed over the proof." By the time I met Danielle at a coffee shop downtown, I was ready. She was sharp, professional, mid-40s, with a pen that never stopped moving. I slid the evidence binder across the table. For 3 hours, I walked her through every lie. The fundraiser money, the fake medical records, the photo theft, the fabricated scenes. She kept nodding, her face growing paler with every page. Finally, she closed her notebook and said quietly, "This is one of the clearest cases of memoir fraud I've ever seen. We'll need to involve the legal team immediately." I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. "Do whatever you need to do. I just want the truth on record." She looked me straight in the eye. "You may have just saved us from publishing a con." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. Peace. But it didn't last long. 3 days later, Victoria called me, her voice shaking. "The publisher just emailed me. They want an emergency meeting. They wouldn't say why. Do you think it's about marketing?" I smiled to myself. "Could be," I said softly. "Good luck, sis." She thanked me, oblivious. And that was the last quiet moment before everything exploded. Victoria's meltdown hit like a bomb. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she showed up at my apartment door, pounding so hard the frame rattled. I opened it to find her standing there with mascara streaked down her face, shaking and gasping like she'd just run through a storm. "They canceled it," she screamed before I could say a word. "They canceled my book, Marin. They said there were discrepancies. They're threatening legal action. Legal action." She shoved a crumpled letter into my chest. My fingers brushed the paper, and I saw the publisher's logo at the top. Words like contract termination, refund of advance, and potential fraud investigation jumped out at me. I didn't even have to ask how they found out. Danielle Cook must have done her job well. Victoria was still ranting. "You told them, didn't you? You went behind my back. You destroyed everything I built." Her voice cracked, and she started sobbing. Loud, messy sobs that echoed through my hallway. Then came the switch I'd seen 1,000 times before. Rage. She stormed into my living room, knocking over a lamp, sending shards of glass across the floor. "You've always been jealous," she screamed, grabbing a framed photo of us from the shelf and hurling it against the wall. "You couldn't stand that. For once, people loved me." I didn't move. I just watched her unravel. "People didn't love you, Victoria. They loved the idea of a good sister. You were never that." She froze, face twisted, eyes wild. "You think you're better than me because you had cancer?" I exhaled slowly. "No." I think I survived something you could never handle. The truth. That's when my parents arrived. I should have known she'd call them. My mom's eyes were puffy, and my dad looked ready for a fight. Marin, he barked, what did you do? Your sister's devastated. I almost laughed. She committed fraud, Dad. She stole money from strangers and turned my cancer into a business. She meant well, my mom sobbed. You've embarrassed this family. Something in me snapped. I grabbed the thick evidence binder from my desk and slammed it down on the coffee table so hard it echoed. Read it, I said. Every lie. Every fake post. Every dollar she stole. My parents sat, flipping through the pages, their expressions changing from outrage to disbelief to silent horror. Victoria tried to snatch the binder away, but I caught her wrist. No more pretending. My voice shook, but I kept going. You ruined my treatment, my peace, my family, for likes, for pity, and now you're finally going to deal with the fallout. For the first time in my life, Victoria didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, breathing hard, her face blotchy and red. Then she screamed, wordless, primal, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. My mother sat there crying, whispering, What have we done? And I said, You let her believe she could do anything without consequence. It was quiet after that. No one spoke. My parents left without another word. That night, my phone blew up. Family, distant relatives, people taking sides. Half calling me cruel, half calling me brave. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I didn't care what anyone thought. Because Victoria's stage had finally collapsed, and I was done being part of her show. The fallout was louder than I expected. Within 24 hours, the story spread online like wildfire. Someone inside the publishing house leaked the investigation emails, screenshots of legal language about fraudulent claims, and misrepresentation of medical necessity. By nightfall, Victoria's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Her fundraiser page flooded with furious comments. People demanded refunds. Cancer survivors wrote paragraphs about feeling exploited. Someone calculated she'd kept $7,000 of donation money and tagged every major news outlet. Victoria tried damage control, posting one last statement on Instagram about creative misunderstandings and the complexity of grief. But the comments section turned on her within minutes. When the first donor threatened to file a police report, she deleted her account entirely. Then Facebook disappeared. Then Twitter. By morning, she was gone from the internet. My lawyer, Donald Terry, called that afternoon. She's agreed to repay the full $15,000 plus the church donations. Her attorney scrambling to settle before charges escalate. I thanked him quietly. For once, justice didn't feel like vengeance. It just felt still. A few days later, the journalist who'd first glorified her reached out, Harvey. He wanted to write a correction piece, this time telling the truth. I met him at the same coffee shop where I'd first received his flash drive. He looked 10 years older, guilt heavy on his face. He listened while I went through everything again, this time not as evidence, but as my story. When the article came out, it exploded. The headline read, The Sister Who Stole Cancer, How One Woman Turned a Family Tragedy into a Scam and Got Caught. People rallied behind me. Survivors, advocates, even strangers sent messages saying my strength helped them feel seen. For the first time, I wasn't the background character in Victoria's drama. I was myself again. Mom called crying 3 days later. She apologized, truly apologized, for enabling Victoria her whole life. She started therapy and asked if we could rebuild. Dad stayed silent, still clinging to his delusion that Victoria meant well. I told Mom I'd try, but only if honesty was the rule from now on. Months passed. My body healed. My hair grew back. I started working with a nonprofit for cancer patients, helping others set boundaries with toxic family members. It was work that mattered, work born from hell, but still something good. Victoria eventually moved states away. Rumor was she changed her last name. I didn't follow up. I didn't need to. A year after remission, my support group threw me a small party, balloons, cake, music, real people, no cameras, no hashtags. As I looked around that room, at my mother smiling through tears, at my new partner's hand resting gently over mine, I realized what survival really meant. It wasn't just beating cancer. It was learning that family isn't who claims your pain. It's who helps you carry it. And for the first time in my life, I finally felt free.